He was impossible. And when you look back at his film, you can take the film of Otis Taylor and match it up against anybody right now in modern day football.
Welcome back to the Way Past Due podcast. I am your host, Jason Watkins, along with my co-host, Mr. Kerwin Terry, and we would like to welcome everybody to the show here. We are remembering Mr. Otis Taylor, who passed away last Thursday at the age of 80. I know it's been a tough week for me a little bit. I know it has been for you, Kerwin. We've put a lot into the effort of getting him into the Hall of Fame this past year, and it was really kind of a tough thing for us to not have it finished off, But one thing I would say is that I feel like at least he's got some peace now, and we're not done with our with the job that we set out on a year ago.
Well, first, Jason, I would like to send out condolences to the Otis Taylor family, wife Regina Otis Taylor III, the Kansas City Chiefs organization, the Kansas City, City of Houston, and Prairie View A&M University.
Absolutely.
He meant a lot to a lot of individuals in all those communities, and may he rest in peace.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better. It's something that amazes me, and it has since the day one, even our intro video to our channel, which, by the way, if you are not already a member of our Way Past Due channel, the obviously the address is right there below us there, youtube.com/waypastdue. Make sure you get on there and become a subscriber. That helps the visibility more than you know. Just hitting that like button while you're here. If you're watching on Facebook, do us a favor. Go ahead and click into the to the YouTube and hit that like button in there too. It helps no matter what, but it definitely gets us in front of more people. And this is what we ran into more than I think anything, was the fact that we just, it was one of those things where you just didn't have enough visibility, I think, overall. And we got a late start on the whole deal is anyway, but part of the things that, it's always interaction with the content that is going to get it pushed out to more people. And we've obviously been making strides at that, but it's something that we need to do. So do us a favor, jump on there, subscribe, hit that like button. We'd appreciate it. Now, what I was saying is, it's since day one of this thing, it's been crazy for me that I've always felt like, it just surprised me that, and Ken Houston says it all the time. It's like 50 years later, everybody still talks about Otis Taylor all the time. How many people have you heard say he's my favorite Chief of all time? He hadn't played football in 50 years.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. But he captivated so many.
People haven't seen the film, and I think one of the things that you have done and produced is the historical record. We've seen a lot of film pieced together from the legends, but one of the things that we've been able to do is pull out and do comparisons, which make a lot of difference. And to continue to get that in front of people is really important, because that's the only way you're going to knock down some of the myths that are out there, him and his career.
Well, and that's the thing. There just are so many. Well, some of them are stupid narratives, just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And it makes sense why they started, but how we haven't found a way through that and past that when I mean, if you watch football at all, you know that the game is not the same today as it was 10 years ago, much less 60 years ago when he started playing professional football. It's
I mean, you had Stickum and folks using Stickum.
people chucking the freaking football now. You know what I mean? It's if you have a heavy run team, you're the anomaly now. I think about Jim
which was
Harbaugh.
Kansas City.
Right.
You know,
Right.
If you think about Kansas City offense, you compare that to an offense run by the Tennessee Titans. That's the kind of offense that Kansas City ran. 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
3
And
yards in a cloud of dust.
very few teams were those passing teams, and the passing teams were basically in the AFL, but the Kansas City Chiefs was not.
They were
those.
Well, and I think that Hank Stram was innovative with his offense, but there was times that he went straight, let's just run it, particularly when they played the Raiders. How much of that I
very innovative.
Yeah,
but he was innovative using the run, and he loved his kicking game also. So and he had a hell of a defense, which is that defense one of the best defenses that has ever been assembled.
Oh, man after man after man after man on that defense, insane, insane, and yeah. Here's the other thing, and you're right about this, Hawaiian Ice. This is something that we've talked about as well, and he talks about it in his book, the Need to Win. Blocking. He was not only was he the best receiver as far as catching the football, he was also probably the best blocking receiver. Well, I mean, heck, it would probably be safe to say ever, because they don't do that crap. Most receivers didn't then. They sure don't now. You're not.
He got his hands dirty.
Oh yeah. And again, in the way that he played the game, I think would have obviously some effect on what has been going on in his life for the past almost 20 years. That he has been bedridden from the way he played the game of football, from the concussions, and we know a lot about these things that you never knew back then. Play right through it, just continue on, and
listen, his last season, it was not really a last season.
No, he didn't.
He had to retire because of knee injuries, and his seasons were cut short because of injuries.
Right.
And it's
and he started missing more games as it went on, and after that 71 season where he was the UPI MVP, the only receiver ever to be named UPI MVP, he was second in AP voting. The
only who? That was Roger Staubach.
That was actually, the guy that won the AP was not Roger Staubach. It was Jackie Slater. The only lineman to ever win the MVP award. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
I thought it was Staubach.
It's wild, isn't it? Okay. No, he tied Roger in second in the AP vote, but he was named UPI MVP, which is still nobody else has ever done it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Not even your great Jerry Rice.
Nope. Well, Jerry was named by the Pro Football Writers MVP and was second in the AP vote to John Elway, but not in the UPI. UPI was basically another Associated Press. It's the same. It was a wire service, which was run at the time by Hearst Corporation. It was owned by them. In fact, they're still around. They're just not the same as they once were. I don't know that Hearst still owns it, but it's obviously not the same. Now, getting into all that, I mean, and it's not all that it's about. And his life was not just about the Hall of Fame. I think it's fair to say that he did not spend every waking moment worried about the Hall and what he did. As he said in his book, when you remember this part where he was talking about he would much rather know that he had a Super Bowl ring that a lot of people don't have, and did the things, the dirty work for his team to help them win than anything else. So that's what meant the most to him was their winning, and that's why it's the name of his book was the need to win. But he was such an amazing
Well,
athlete, and
also when you look at when you read his book, you also come to get an understanding of the man and the
right,
life that was lived in Kansas City during the time of second integration, because he arrived in Kansas City around 1965, and that's when the Civil Rights Act just been passed. And Kansas City is a southern city, and you had the same type of discrimination that you had in the South. So moving to Kansas City, you were not able to get the housing that the other players, the other white players, were able to afford or even purchase. So you were now. That said, there were probably some pretty decent homes in Kansas City that blacks were able to purchase at that time. But nevertheless, he still did not have that freedom to move
right. And Bobby
around
Bell
and
talks about that a
relocate.
lot. Bobby Bell talks about that a lot. That there was some issues with the housing when they first got there. Because they all came in around the same time. Yeah.
Fred,
Listen,
Fred
I
the
mean, in
Hammer
that I was.
Williams was that second.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then Curly Culp and those guys. I mean, during the desegregation and stuff. I mean, they were all there during that, and it was a wild time. It was a wild time
Some tough
in
times.
America. Tough times, and the thing is, and this is the problem. It's that you start looking at these statistics and you get so hung up on them and you forget that the game was so much different. I mean, I've rewritten my letter that we used last year for the nomination. And I continue to do so, but it's because you just kind of figure things out more and more and more all the time. And there's just always more to say. What I
Mhm.
would tell you is that these numbers that we've figured out that, and that these guys are sports writers, and they've been covering pro football for a long time. These guys that are Hall of Fame selectors, they know that what numbers mean what. And they know that, and guys like, when we start talking about guys like Rick Gosselin from Sports Illustrated, and he's been covering professional football for 50 years, and he doesn't know that the game is different. And this is a guy that's on the senior committee. You've got John McClain, who covered, how long was he at the Houston Chronicle covering pro football? Heck, he still doesn't. He's retired. Don't tell me that they don't know. But it's it's not as
Well,
easy
Jason, when
to
you've got a
see.
situation where you're trying to get one person into the Hall of Fame over X number of years, which was a long time. Let's make that clear. They were only putting in one player, one senior player, into the Hall of Fame for since the beginning, and except for in 2020 when they put in 20 players. So that's going to create a backlog, no matter what kind of organization you're
And
trying to
well, and that's
create.
the whole thing. There's a backlog because the Hall of Fame didn't show up until 40 years after the NFL began. You know, it was,
That's
they
your
didn't.
starting point.
That's the starting
Yeah,
point. Is 40 years after the game became a professional game. And you know how it was back then. It was, I mean, if you were a professional most college football was what mattered, but pro football players, they were looked at kind of like professional golfers were for a long time. It's just, if you were not an amateur playing, you were persona non grata, pretty much. You know, it's just
Yeah,
kind
I
of how it
mean,
was.
and even during Otis Taylor's era, those players had
Right.
to have off-season jobs. Now,
Oh, sure.
one of their jobs was to they played basketball on a circuit, and which was one of the stories that was in his book, where they traveled around and they did a kind of Harlem Globetrotters
Supernat
thing
was
in the
talking about that
Midwest.
the other night too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
Supernat
did.
was
He
talking
did.
about that. That was cool, man. Yeah.
It was.
I enjoyed that conversation, you know. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, and again, I mean, the game is just a different game. I mean, when you start looking, and we talked about this towards the end, whenever once Otis didn't get in as a finalist, and we started talking about what's going on with the hall, the procedures themselves. First and foremost, and this is something that Valle Gregorian had talked about, that their first priority is the modern era. Okay,
Correct.
you know, and okay, fine, and you need to keep that a priority, because if you start, that helps add to this backlog, which now you're seeing guys that like Roger Craig and um, Sterling Sharp and guys like that that are now in that senior division, and when you start trying to put them up against guys that played during the merger era, it's just not it. I mean, there's no way that the numbers could possibly look the same, and particularly when it doesn't get framed correctly ever. You know, they
Mhm.
don't have a reason why they have to do it. They don't. I mean, we can sit here, and because there's plenty of things that show you that he is a Hall of Fame player. I mean, he was most most receivers that played in and around his era didn't have as many all pro selections. Most of them did not have as many 1,000-yard seasons. Lynn Swann didn't even never get 900 yards in a season. You know, and I'm not
And that was
saying,
10
and
years after
we, huh?
that was 10
Say that
years
again.
after Otis played when Lynn Swann played. So that's
Correct.
almost in a total. Uh, Matter of fact, that is in a different era.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
and even guys like Drew Pearson.
on.
Drew Pearson had like 500 yards more than Otis total. He played like 30 more games. Okay.
Mhm.
He played 30 more games. He was not the same kind of player that Otis was. He was gonna, Lamar Parrish was always talking about him being a whiner, about contact, you know,
Mhm.
and that he would. And I mean, I've read a lot of stuff that Lamar said. I would so love to have him on the show. We're efforting that as we speak. In fact, now, guys, anybody that wants to jump in, if you want to jump in and say something and what your greatest memory of Otis Taylor was, please do so. It doesn't look like we have a ton of people in the stream just yet. We will be bringing in one of my favorite watches, old Vincent from the 100 Yards of Football. He should be on here in about 20 minutes. So, but as you can see at the very top of the chat here, we've got that link there. So if you want to jump in there, if you are and you don't have to use your face if you don't want to. You can just just make a call, or but all you'll have to do is just tap that link on your phone. You will have to give permission for for StreamYard to use your camera and your microphone. We're having some issues right now. We should have Ralph Cooper in here. We can't get him in here for whatever reason. He's having some struggles with that. So now, but what I was saying is, I mean, everybody knows that these freaking numbers are different, and that's the thing that's so bothersome, is that you start looking at, well, the game was just so different. I mean, we could even just talk about it in terms of, you look at Travis Kelce right now. This is a tight end that has about 700 catches in his first 11 years, and he had his first season. He didn't play at all because he was hurt. He got hurt in training camp and didn't play at all. So it's basically the same as Otis's, and he has more than 300 more catches as a tight end, not as a receiver, as a tight end. Otis Taylor is still number 3 all time in the organization, despite the fact that they've gone through iterations of much more throwing. And clearly now they chuck it, you know. Um, if Tyreek Hill would not have left at the end of last season, he would have passed Otis this season in Chiefs history because he's passed him up. And Tyreek's been, and you look at it that way, he's only played, this is his 7th season, and he's already passed that. But of course he is, because he's played for pass-happy offenses in the West Coast offense, and he's got a lot of speed. But if you look at his, I mean, he only averages 14 yards per reception. Otis averaged 17.8 yards per reception throughout his career. He had a season where he had over 22 yards per reception, and then he had the 19.1, which is the one I was talking about in my letter. That was the 71 season when he became UPI MVP. He ended up with 1,110 yards on 57 receptions. Now, if you look at that into it, it is incredible. And it's pretty simple to tell you why too, because here's the deal. If you look at it in today's standards, it's not that incredible. I mean, that's, you're not a pro.
Well, the 20 yards per catch. Yeah, that's still incredible.
Yeah.
You're not going to find
that is. No, well, he was at 19. So,
yeah,
but
19.
yeah, that's the whole
close.
Yeah, that's insanity, man. No, you don't ever see that. And of all the guys that are at the very top, none of those guys, I think the closest guy to him is like Jerry Rice, and he's behind him still in yards per reception but he played a longer period too. And I think during that 10-year period, his first 10 years, if you were to just put those up against Otis's, they would be very, very similar as far as some of those numbers that you can kind of compare against. The completions, I've talked about with that apples to apples stat, that what we want to do is show you by production, and that's what I'm talking about here. When you consider,
how about that swag though?
That swag. What about the swag?
About that swag, Jerry Rice, Otis Taylor. Yeah, how about that swag?
Hey man, that I'm telling you. Well, think about it. Terrell Owens also from the swag. Hey man, that whole freaking defense of the Chiefs came from the swag.
Right.
Ooh, goodness.
HBCU
football. That's why these narratives, we've talked about these narratives are ridiculous. The fact that, they talk about the inferiority deal, that the AFL was so inferior to the NFL, except that they won after losing the first two to the Packers, who were kicking the crap out of everybody for 10 years before that. Anyway, after those first two, they won 4 of the next 6. And they split the first 8. So, you know what I mean? It's just BS.
And it was done.
The other thing is, why in the world would you merge with somebody who's so inferior? If you didn't need them, you wouldn't have merged. It's it's like, why would you even say that? Because it just makes you look bad.
And while the AFL brought a lot to the game, and
absolutely,
they're doing different things with
people to games. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Something that Supernaut was talking about the other night is they felt comfortable that they had a majority black football team in Kansas City, and they were one of the very first,
right?
Because they were the ones that were actually scouting the HBCUs. Lloyd Wells was cruising, man.
He was producing.
He sure was.
Like a Southern grad. Yeah.
So there's another man that should be in the Hall of Fame, and it's ridiculous that he's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't even know if he's ever been. I know we nominated him last year.
Right, and like you said, yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame under the contributors.
Contributor, yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I mean, think about all the guys that he put all the Hall of Famers that he sent to the Chiefs, and just that, hey man, the story of Otis Taylor and how he ended up with the Chiefs is Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah.
Hall
He's got
of
a lot
Fame
of
worthy.
stories like that. You know, I like to talk
Yeah.
about that story where he is swept away and housed in a Dallas hotel, and then winds
Mhm.
up in Kansas City. Uh, but I also love that final game and like to note that he was the last person to score AFL touchdown. That's his story, and of course, being from the Wallings and him scoring that touchdown in Tulane Stadium also means a lot too.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Absolutely. Hey, oh man, he just cooked those dudes. He cooked
oh
them.
yeah,
And if you think about the first Super Bowl, they didn't have a very good game plan. Stram said that all the way up until the day he died. He talked about how terrible his game plan was, and Lenny wasn't great. They just did not have a
that
great
second
game.
half, that second half was they
Hmm.
made up for it. They made up for it, and
They sure did.
won
They
Super
sure
Bowl
did.
four.
Hmm. And they dominated the game. And
Mhm.
honestly, they had lost twice to the Raiders that year. It didn't look like they were going to get there, and somehow the defense kind of, I think they had some injuries and stuff. I was watching some of this stuff. They had a few injuries or whatever, and but that last regular season game, they'd gotten beat like 41-7 or something like that, and then they just shut them down in the AFC Championship game, or AFL Championship game. So yeah, it was. And that was the first year that they had extended playoffs where you had to play two games to
Mhm.
get in. So, and they had to go on the road for both of them. They were essentially the first wild card team to win the Super Bowl, even though that was their second Super Bowl in 4 seasons. Only only the Packers did that too. Went to two of them, in the first 4 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was the Raiders
Yeah,
and the Chiefs.
it was close, and I'll tell you what is this monkey squat on top? What I don't know what that means, man. I don't know what that means. Um, so yeah, I don't know what that is. You can keep that off of there. I'm not sure what that is, folks. If you are enjoying this, but let me just finish what I was saying about these stats. Here's what I would tell you: there's a difference in production, and if you look at it from a production standpoint, you can compare guys from different eras, and since they want to do it, you can do it, and you can show that he was right there, right? I mean, he was right there with them. All right, then we can get rid of him.
And Jason, you developed a tool to do it, and it's in your apples to apples.
Yes, and look, and as we said, right there on the YouTube page on Way Past Due, if you'll go to the apples to apples, there are some there's some we've got the statistical stuff there. We're gonna post. I'm gonna have to post some stuff. I'll put it up in a different spot than where we had it before. But essentially, what it does is this: you are taking into consideration the amount of passing versus the amount of running. Which, when you were the Chiefs during the merger era, you ran the ball more than everybody else. Um, and so what you do is rather than just going by those raw numbers, you got to think of it in terms of on 57 catches to get 1,110 yards. And he, in his 1,297 yard season, was also with 57 catches. And that was his second season in the league. Right now, but to get 1,100 yards, to put it in perspective, Torrey Holt in the 2000 season, this is the greatest show on turf Rams. Okay. He had 1,635 yards on 82 receptions. He averaged 19.9, I believe. Yeah. He averaged 19.9 yards per catch. If you compare that to Otis Taylor, Otis averaged 19.5 yards per catch. Torrey Holt was responsible for 21% of all receptions which they threw the ball around a lot. So if you think, oh, here's where you start seeing why it's important to not just look at those in numbers, the ones that everybody looks at, the yardage, the touchdowns, whatever. Okay. When you look at what they did as a team, okay, my goodness, what was it?
Wasn't Otis's share of offensive production?
It was
in the
higher.
30% range?
Correct. It was 30%. So if you look at what happened, let's just talk about the Rams real quick. You had two, not only Torrey Holt, but you also had Isaac Bruce that had over 80 receptions. And you also had Marshall Faulk, who had over 80 receptions. 240 catches between those three guys, okay? And they all had over 1,000 yards. Now, when you look at that, and here's why. Because they had the Super Bowl champs from the year before that, the Rams, had 587 pass attempts. They completed 380 balls. If you look at the Chiefs in that 71 season, they attempted 337 passes. The Rams had 380 completions. The Chiefs attempted 337 passes, okay? They completed 183 balls. So where Torrey had 21% of the receptions that were to be had there on the greatest show on turf, Otis accounted for 31% of the receiving production, okay? 31, so 10% higher. Now, obviously, they had more weapons at their disposal on the Rams. So you can understand why that might be a little different for Torrey Holt, right? But that's an amazing season, though, by the way. What an amazing season
And
for him. And he was a
just
second-year player.
I think either Mr. Houston or Mr. Smith said last week that you knew when they were going to pass because they only passed on third down. They weren't passing on first down or second
I've had a
down.
lot
They
of
were
guys that have
only
told us
passing
that
on
kind of.
third down. Yeah.
I've had people tell me all the time that he was my favorite player. I was always hoping for third and long because they were going to throw it to Otis. I've had people say that all week. It's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so you're looking at that. If you were to take a look at that and just, let's extrapolate that out. Just thinking about that, it's easy to say that he would have done at least what Torrey Holt did. If he just kept his numbers at 19.5 instead of 19.9, and you gave him the 82 catches that Torrey had if he played in that era, which why wouldn't he? He would have ended up with 1599. That's considering 21.6%, because that's what Torrey had. If he was able to hold on to his 30%, which I don't know that you would have, but let's just say he did, then it would have jumped all the way to 90 receptions. It would have given him 8 more receptions and it would have ended in 1,755 yards and 11 touchdowns instead of his 7. So he already had more touchdowns in 1971 than Torrey Holt did in 2000. He had him by 1 anyway. Now, let's also remember that in 1971, the NFL and the AFL played 14-game seasons. In 2000 and all the way up until these last couple of years, they've played 16. Okay. 2 more games matters. So what I would tell you is there's a big difference. The other difference, it would be the thing that you see that Torrey did not do as well as Otis did was the touchdown ratio. Otis's touchdown ratio, he scored touchdowns on 12% of his catches. Torrey Holt, 7% of his catches.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few receivers all time, and I can tell you this because of how much I have my head in a stat book all the last year. There are very few receivers all time that are anywhere close to his career average is almost 15% for touchdowns. It's unheard of.
Right.
The only there's two guys that are close. Two. Well, there's three. There's two guys that are ahead of him. Jerry Rice by point. Well, he's ahead of him by 2 points, 23. Or I mean, I think he's at 17%. And then Randy Moss is 0.2 ahead of his. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's 0.2 difference between Randy Moss and Otis Taylor. When you consider that touchdown ratio, 15% for your career is insane. That's insane. Those 410 catches. Now, if you were to look at their overall careers, because Torrey Holt is going to be rightfully should be a Hall of Famer, right?
Oh,
I think he was better than I think he was better than Isaac Bruce, and Bruce just got in. So I think that, he better be. And I think that Isaac was great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bad mouthing Isaac, but his total
all the guys.
Yeah.
And as you go through that, there's a dearth of wide receivers that are not in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame represents of all at the 22 positions on the football field, wide receivers have the least number of Hall of Famers in there.
Wild?
And and it's represented by 13%. And you know the reason why? It was a running back era again.
Yeah, that's true too.
And running backs were represented at a higher rate than wide receivers, even though they were going to basically one running back. The position was respected a lot more, and you only had, let's say one wide receiver that was any good on anybody's team. That having two wide receivers is fairly new phenomena among in the National Football League, and to have three, or two and a
four
tight end.
sometimes. They got a lot of times they got four, and nowadays tight ends, you've got a few that block still, but most of them aren't blocking the way they used to.
No.
I mean, Kittle will. There's some of them that will.
Yeah.
Andrews. Yeah. But but when you got Travis Kelce, I mean, why would you want him blocking much? You know what I mean? Like,
not somebody who can get away.
It's mostly a chip. It's a chip more than it's a block. Anyway, at the end of Otis Taylor's career, he had played in 130 games. He had 410 receptions for 7,310 yards. 57 receiving touchdowns. He added 3 more on the ground for 60 total in his career. When Torrey Holt had the exact same length of a career, although he played more in his 11th year. In fact, he only missed I think a total of about 5 games in his career to injury, which is also another surprise. But Torrey Holt had played in 173 games. That's part of that being, of course, that he played that entire 11th year. Okay, we got Vincent coming in too. But he also, he finished his career with 173 games, 920 receptions, 13,382 yards with 74 touchdowns. So he only got Otis total touchdowns by 14, and that's with having 500 more receptions in the same length of a that's what those 2 games does for you. I'm going to bring in, we have our first guest on the show with us. We're going to bring him in now. This is Mr. Vincent Turner. He is one of the first guys that I actually saw when I started looking up information on Otis Taylor. I didn't know the dude. I've told this story before plenty of times. I did not know who Otis was. He was done playing football by the time I was born. And so I grew up just watching Jerry. So my first introduction to Otis Taylor was through this man right here, Mr. Vincent Turner. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Hey, how y'all doing this evening? I'd like to say I'm blessed and honored to be on y'all show this evening. If you could say Vincent Turner 100 yards of football, I surely appreciate
100
it.
yards of football. I did say that earlier, but it is
100
100
yards of
yards of
football.
football.
We watch you all the time. And
Okay,
Love
how
it.
you doing?
Vincent,
Go ahead.
we're doing well. I'm doing fine. And it's
Okay,
great to see you and meet you.
yes, sir. And it's a pleasure, Mr. Terry. Thank you. And it's a pleasure, Mr. Watkins. Thank you for y'all having me on this evening.
Mr.
Well,
Turner,
thank
we've been
you.
waiting to have you on for a while, man. I was just saying that you were my introduction to Otis Taylor. You said he was the gravy on the potatoes. That was the first thing I heard from you, and I said, this dude must have been the man. So when I started, because I got to tell you, it was hard to find a lot of highlights for Otis. I mean, and when you're just looking at the numbers in the raw form, that's what we just were talking about. It's tough to figure out how do you say this guy's a Hall of Famer. When you watch him, not hard, not hard. And then we found some statistical anomalies as well. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But Vincent, tell me, because the basis of this show really was to talk about how important Otis Taylor was, not just to the Kansas City and not just to Houston, but to young men and women and fans of the game of football all over the country loved Otis Taylor and the Chiefs.
Well, basically, as I told you my story with Otis Taylor, I'm going to go back to the 1969 season when the Kansas City Chiefs represented the AFC in the Super Bowl against the Minnesota Vikings. And the thing I think about Otis Taylor is that I was a 9-year-old kid. I don't mean to tell my age, but I'm 62 years old. And I was going into, I believe, the fourth grade at the time. And I had a friend, one of my best friends. His name was Jerry Knowlton. And he ended up going to high school. Me and him went to the same high school. He ended up playing football at Memphis State, just to tell you a little journey. And I remember coming to school the week the Chiefs played the Vikings in the Super Bowl. And Jerry ended up playing wide receiver. And he said, you know what, man? He said, man, I'm a Chiefs fan simply because of Otis Taylor. I'm going to be like him one. I heard of Otis Taylor some years ago, back when I was 6 years old, when he had that big season in the AFL, when he had like 58 receptions, I think 780 yards. But what stuck out in my mind as a 6-year-old at the time, averaged 22 yards reception. But getting back to me and Jerry's conversation, because I was a big Cowboys fan at that time. And he said, you know what? He said that the Chiefs are going to win this football game simply because of Otis Taylor and Lenny Dawson. And you know, the Vikings were heavily favorites in that football game. I think there was a 13-point favorite going into Super Bowl IV. Vikings had Joe Cap, Oscar Reed, Gene Washington, of course, Jim Marshall, Alan Page, Carl Eller. I don't have to say no more. But watching that game, in my ability to watch it on this Taylor, you can't take away that 46-yard reception. That little out.
He cooked those dudes on that freaking play. He cooked them. Just cooked them.
An ability to him to break the tackle on Mr. McBerry, I don't want to butcher his name, and then Carl Krause half stepping down the sideline. To me, that was the introduction of the first explosive big receiver with size. And then when I think about that moment, looking at this 9-year-old, I'll go back all the other sports moments that want to make you jump out of your seat. Then I go back to Lou Brock breaking the all-time Major League stolen base record in 74. And then Ali defeating Foreman and Zaire. And then Herschel Walker running over Bill Bates in 80. And then, of course, O.J. Simpson's 6 or 7-yard run. When number 1, USC, number 2, UCLA, California, yay. When I saw Otis Taylor do that.
I love about his show.
This when I saw that. And then, of course, my man, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, 68 Olympics. You put that right there with Otis Taylor, 46-yard run. Yeah. Those are, to me, the most explosive moments in my life at that time. And think about this. In that 70s season, there was another great moment in the NBA when that young man from Grambling, Willis Reed, came off the bench with the New York Knicks. in Game 7. See, that's how I see Otis Taylor.
Ooh.
And then when you look at Mr. Taylor,
It's funny you say that too.
What I'm really upset today, and thank y'all for coming on to let me come on y'all show today, Mr. Watkins and Mr. Terry, is that nobody in his era talks about him. It's fought for him to be in the Hall of Fame. Granted, he don't have the big numbers like a Calvin Johnson, a T.O., or a Jerry Rice, but think about back then, they ran the ball.
A lot. And Kansas City ran it more than everybody else.
Calvin Hill, you right, Garrett Sayers, Willie Allison. And it really amazes to me that Chris Carter, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, Sterling Sharp, Marvin Harrison, even Shannon Sharp, Shay, Mike Quick, Calvin Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham Jr. Nobody stuck up for this man. And it's a shame. Because
even Jerry Rice and those guys haven't done it. None of them have. No.
When you look at the resume, Otis Taylor started the culture of the big receiver that can get down the field and make catches. And to be honest, he's the reason the receivers getting paid. That's how I feel about Otis Taylor. And then think about this. In the 65 NFL draft, he was a 15-round selection. Think about that. Think about the people that went before him. That's what amazes me. Jack Snow in the first round. Larry Atkins in the first round. Roy Jefferson in the third round out of Utah. I give Fred Biletnikoff a lot of credit. Hall of Famer. Then you talking about Dave Johnson. You talking about John McGee. Then you talking about Gary Garrison. Otis Taylor, 15th round, 203rd pick. But that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is all these other receivers. Terrell Owens, Andre Johnson, Chad Johnson, Herman Moore, Chris Carter, Shannon Sharp, Sterling Sharp. Y'all talking about everything else, but y'all don't give Otis Taylor the flowers. Because he's the one that put y'all there as to being the first big-time receiver. And then think about what the Chiefs teammates
I don't even think the Chiefs do it. The Chiefs don't even do it. That's what
I'm saying. Have you heard Travis Kelce? Have you heard Patrick Mahomes? Nada. But you know what clarifies this?
You haven't heard anything from any of them except for Clark Hunt released a statement. But last year when he became a semifinalist for the Hall, because we put in there with everything that our group did. I mean, we have the Facebook group that worked their tails off. There's a bunch of folks in Kansas City that love Otis Taylor. There's a bunch of folks in Houston that still love Otis Taylor. And I mean, we were able to have these shows and have people on these shows that care because of people like you, Vincent, that care about the man and love him. But there's not enough of them within his own organization that cared enough to even mention it for 2 weeks that he was a semifinalist. Nothing.
I think what you, and another thing too, and I don't want to be redundant, but when you look at Otis Taylor, I understand the era now. You have so much social media out there.
Sure.
It's much more training at a high level. But the reason I like Otis Taylor is the obstacles he faced out of Prairie View University. Absolutely. Right there, a swag school, no respect right there. Let's be real about it.
They won 2 national championships.
That's what I'm saying. Then you're looking at the high school you went to, Warrington. Think about who came after him, who he set the table for. Mike Singletary, Cliff Branch, Larry Mishaw with the Houston Cougars, 5-slammer jammer. Think about the great athletes that came out of that. Even you want to go entertainment, Terry Ellis, former lead singer, In Vogue. But my thing that I've
David Latine from he played for a long time.
Yeah, you that's what I'm saying. But my thing, one thing that I'm gonna do before I go to my grave, I'm gonna give all the kudos to the players that played in the 60s coming out of the SWAC. Because to me, they set the tone for the NFL. And I always tell people this, and people look at me crazy, but the greatest moment that I'm taking in my life as a 6-year-old, my dad was able to take me to Nashville, Tennessee. I'm from Memphis. Everyone here on the platform to see the Tennessee State Tigers play in 1966. Now, they won the Power 5 school that year, like the schools that were kind of high rated that year, Alabama, Michigan State and Notre Dame ended up being the top 3 schools. Notre Dame had Jim Lynch and Alan Page. Michigan State had Jimmy Rand, Bubba Smith, and then, of course, Alabama had Ken Stable and Ray Perkins. But that Tennessee State team, 22 players drafted the next 3 years in the NFL draft. Eldridge Dickey, King Dunlap III, Claude Humphrey, Jimmy Marsalis, and Nolan Smith. I don't have to say no more. As they say, the young people drop the mic. So when you look at all those people and look at all those great players, I'm gonna make it my point to always give them their flowers because they really set the game and where it is today.
Absolutely.
But what I'm really upset today about is that Otis Taylor is not in the Hall of Fame. And I think even though they want to talk about he only had 7,306 yards.
I'm going to tell you why that's a trash number.
But think about this, gentlemen. He was playing in a league when they weren't throwing the football.
Nope.
They were running.
Here's the thing you got to look at on that. His numbers were what they were because of the team he played for. On average, the Chiefs threw the ball at least 100 yards less. Some teams 150 yards, 150 attempts less. Even with the AFL, they were more pass happy than the NFL was. But not the Chiefs. The Chiefs were on average at least 100 attempts behind. So you probably get another 10, 15, 20 balls if they're just on par with that 100, right? Not only that, this number that everybody keeps talking about, and we were just talking about this too. If you look at his 1971 UPI MVP season where he was second in the AP voting as well, you look at that season, he had 57 receptions, 1,110 yards. He averaged 19.5 yards per reception. You can put that season alone, and that's not even his best season, but you can throw that season up there against Torrey Holt in The Greatest Show. Torrey had 82 receptions that year. He had 1,635 yards. He averaged 19.9, so a little more on the average side. But Otis caught 31% of all passes were caught by Otis Taylor. It was 21% for Torrey. Otis had more touchdowns. If you just swap them out, and you can do that. I mean, think about this for a second. If they were able to swap out, you know that Otis is going to do the same thing, and Torrey probably would too, right? It would probably be very similar either way. This is when you know that these guys are very, very good. Torrey Holt had 14,000 yards almost in his career. He's a Hall of Fame player, right? The difference is when they are this close on all these things, you start looking at production. That season, I was just showing this to Kerwin, that season alone right there, Vincent, they actually completed 50 more footballs than the Chiefs even attempted. The Chiefs attempted 300 and let me find it again. I just had it. Yeah, so all over. Okay. The Rams had 587 pass attempts and had 380 completions. Greatest show on turf, right? The Chiefs, 337 pass attempts and 183 completions. And he had 1,110 yards. He's 500 freaking yards behind, right? 500 yards behind. But he was also 30 freaking catches behind, or 25 anyway. 25 receptions. And because they threw the ball, they literally threw the ball, what? Good grief.
Almost
literally 500, another
more.
200, almost 300 times more. Yeah. So when you look at the end of their career, yeah, Torrey Holt, he had a great career. He did have a great career. But Otis played in 130 games because he never went out of bounds either. That was a guy he was a blocker. He did a lot of things. The other part is they played 14 game seasons, not 16 game seasons like them. They didn't have the benefit of the illegal contact rule like they had after 77. Otis never played under that. Never. Imagine not being and Johnny Robinson says that all the time. He goes, hell, I don't know what he would have done if they didn't get to touch him after 5 yards. They would have never been able to hold him. And Ken Houston said the other night, he goes, man, we couldn't guard him with 3 guys. 3 dudes, we couldn't cover him. What were we going to do if we couldn't touch him? He said, we cut his big butt right at the line. He's told me and Kerwin that. I love having those talks with Ken Houston. He's funny. He's like, but he says, you better cut his big butt right at the line or you're toast. You know, Lamar Parrish, I've seen quotes from him where he was like, man, I hated playing against him. Hated it. You know? So, but look, so he played 130 games. He had 7,310 yards with 410 receptions, 60 total touchdowns, 57 of them by catching them. In 173 games, Torrey Holt had 920 receptions. In 43 more games, that's 510 additional receptions, and he only has 14 more touchdowns total. You have to look at the whole picture if you're gonna really compare these guys, because that's the thing. Why they compare these guys, I have never understood. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be about the best players. It's a museum, number one, but it's about the best players from you are telling the story of the game of football by the best players of their era. You know, you shouldn't have to keep up with these guys, and the game doesn't even look the same anymore. And it didn't look the same in the 60s as it did when it started. The ball used to look like a freaking medicine ball. It got smaller when they started throwing it, you know, when they weren't just carrying the ball. The game changes, but they're not taking that into consideration. You still hear the stupid narrative about inferiority for the AFL, which is dumb. They wouldn't even have merged with them if they were inferior. You know they wouldn't have. And they won half of the first 8 Super Bowls. Matter of fact, they won 4 out of the next 6 after Green Bay got done. And they had been kicking the crap out of everybody in the NFL for 10 years before that. What was new? You know what I mean? It's that they were a superior team at first, but the AFL was real. And hey, man, I don't think it's a stretch to say that black people are better athletes than white guys, than all them white boys running that 3 yards in a cloud of dust crap in the NFL. I'm sorry, truth. It's just what it is. You know, even Hawaiian Ice gets it. He says, yeah, if a white guy did what he did, he'd already be in the Hall. Absolutely. Absolutely. You ain't wrong.
So, Vincent, where do you think we go from here?
I think we just have to, first and foremost, kudos to the Taylor family, to Otis Taylor and his wife, his sister, for what they had to endure in the problems that he had over the years. But I think where we need to go is probably more platforms like this, lobbying for him to get in the Hall of Fame. There's a platform that I'm a part of, which is a SWAC, that I try to do. When I do a SWAC player, I send over my video over to them. Basically, Mr. Terry, it's up to the athletes of the day. Because one thing that I'm never gonna take from where I'm at today in my life is because it's the older people that was ahead of me. They taught me how to be good, taught me how to be a man. That's my father, who still lives in Chester Turner in Memphis, Tennessee, who's 86. My mother, Inez, is 84. So I think you got to take the more younger players that's in the spotlight, like a Shannon Sharp, like a Randy Moss, like a Herman Moore, like a Chad Johnson, like a Terrell Owens, like a DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham. The younger people got to stand up and do their homework instead of getting into all this. You know where I'm coming from, Mr. Terry. It give homage to the people that came before them. I don't have nothing to do. What's that, sir?
So what do you think about some of the Kansas City Chiefs players? You know, they have high profile.
Yeah. Let me put them first. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. But we live in a world right now, Mr. Terry. It's like it's about me now. I'm gonna get my flowers, but when you look at it, you don't never hear nobody mention the former people that came before them. And you're right, both you and Mr. Watkins. It started with the Chiefs organization. If your own organization not gonna honor you, then hey. And I think Mr. Taylor, what I did my research, he wanted to get on the coaching staff. It can't see when he retired, but Ma Levy never brought him onto the staff. They kept him in a scout capacity. So it's what it is. I mean, sometimes money changes people. People feel like, hey, I don't want my money touched. And right now, the Kansas City Chiefs. Go ahead, sir.
Well, and you know, it brings back that some of the cliches and myths about blacks in coaching. And during those particular times, they didn't allow very many African Americans to be coaches. So, unfortunately, for the Chiefs, now the Raiders were a little bit more progressive. But you know what? Those Raider fans, they are also some of the strongest Otis Taylor supporters. So kudos to them.
Al Davis
they
asked
knew
about him every time he saw Bobby Bell, he said.
But this is the Keep Real show, right? As far as the Raiders organization, don't get me wrong, they gave a lot of opportunities to African American players, but I don't too much like Al Davis because they drafted my boy who I seen play 6 years old, Eldridge Dickey, and never really gave him a shot. And then moved into wide receiver. You can do your back channel work. And then when you look at it, Ken Stabler ended up becoming the starter. And then Eldridge Dickey kind of really lost everything it mean to being a football player. You can look and read between the lines.
I was watching something about that the other night, actually.
So I'm not going to be too much Al Davis fan because I remember you can do your back channel where he came down to Tennessee State and scouted Eldridge Dickey. And at the time, the head coach, John Meredith, said, hey, if you drive Eldridge Dickey, please treat him right. That didn't happen. And Eldridge Dickey was out of the league in 4 years. But Mr. Terry, you brought up a good point. I think when you look at the whole landscape, you think about this. Ali is my greatest athlete. And I'm going to tell you why. He gave up everything at a time that he was on top of the game and lost a lot of money. And at the end of the day, you know, it's what it is. If you don't own anything, you're not going to be a voice. That's another topic for another show. But when you look at that, it's how much that you want to give up for what you believe in. And Muhammad Ali, to me, is going to be the greatest athlete there, along with Tommy Smith and John Carlos. And when you look at
lose 5 years to his career on that deal, I mean, like, and he still ended up winning the title 3 times after losing 5 years of his prime to that draft thing, that whole draft thing. That's crazy.
But think about this, not to get away from Mr. Terry's question, is that basically sometimes you got to ask yourself, how much money do I need to survive? How much fame do I need to survive? But most of all, are you going to do what's right? And really, for us, we got to take platforms to lobby for Mr. Taylor, but it's really got to take the athletes that came after Mr. Taylor, who he set the table for, especially the Jerry Rices of the world, the Doug Williams of the world out of the SWAC conference, the Len Barneys, the Jackie Slaters, the Robert Bazils. I don't hear nobody, even from the SWAC, mention about him getting in the Hall of Fame. And that's kind of really weird to me, not only Kansas City Chiefs, but the SWAC conference. Yeah. Not even
not only. You don't see it for other players too, and I think this will set hopefully the table for not only Otis getting into the Hall of Fame, but other players like Harold Jackson.
Yes, sir.
You know, that's another wide receiver that needs to go into the Hall. And Jason has his favorites. Then there's
Harold Jackson,
even
one of
other
them.
players.
Lamar Parrish is my favorite. I think he ought to be.
Lamar Parrish is your
easily.
favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So that this, this is what I see as an opportunity, to go forward. Now, on the Hall of Fame side, though, not only
They need to
do we
make
need
changes.
to get the lobbying going, but
Yeah.
you're not going to get these players into the Hall of Fame by only having 1 to 3 people in the Hall of Fame every year. There needs to be a concerted effort.
It's 130 backlogged right now.
Well, to at least look at. I would say that over a 10-year period, 8 to 10-year period, that you look at, maybe getting even 8 to 10 of these players into the Hall of Fame, so that you can clear up the back. And that way, I think it would be fair and it would clear up any problems that they would
it's
have.
debatable on whether they need to put 10 in, but you need to have the willingness to do 5, 6 at a time, just like you do with the the modern era players, because of the fact that there are so many. Lamar Parrish has never even been spoken about in that room. They've never even brought his name up. The dude went to 8 Pro Bowls in 10 years. Was all pro first team 3 times. There isn't another corner that did that in that era, from that era. And he's not even been spoken about. It's unbelievable to me. Unbelievable.
When you have 25 people, I'm sorry, when you have 25 people as semifinalists, that's, and you can reduce it down to 3.
Yeah, it's tough.
The numbers don't make sense.
And like you said, at the end of it, you're still they're talking about if they do this for the next, they did it last year. If they do 3 next year and 3 the year after that, and they stop, then they got 9 in instead of 3. Okay, great. But that's what, now we're down to 121, that really haven't gotten a fair shake. So I get what you're saying. What I'm telling you is that they better at least start. I think that when in 2020, then they did the 20 guys. Man, it'd be great to do that 1 or 2 more times. You know what I mean? Let's really take a look at these guys. And on top of that, I think the biggest change that needs to be made is start letting the players freaking have a vote in this, a bigger hand in this. Listen, Brian Urlacher was talking about Zach Thomas this past year. I saw him on he was on McAfee's show, and he was complaining that Zach Thomas has the same numbers as me and Ray, and he hasn't made it in yet, and he's probably not going to make it in. Well, he did, thankfully, and I think it was because of guys like Brian and Ray. But he was like, and why? Because you got a bunch of stupid-ass sports writers in there that are freaking making these decisions that never played football. Look, I believe that sports writers know plenty, but I know that so many of them have an axe to grind too. I mean, I got into it with Rick Gosselin last year after they left him out of the finalists. I was pissed about it, and he came back. What he came back at me with, Vincent, was just like, Jim Tyre and Buddy both were on the all AFL team, the all-time AFL team, and he wasn't. Is he more deserving than them? And I was like, you know what, dude, don't be throwing up all your misses just to justify this one, because you're missing, period. You're just telling me more that you're missing. And that's the problem. If Ken Houston is a top 100 freaking player of all time, and he's telling me that he's the best he's ever played against, maybe you should listen to that guy. Who was better?
Or people like Mrs. Smith. They definitely need to have a more player involved, even if it's just the Hall of Fame players that have been in the Hall of Fame, because these guys are getting away from us quickly, and unless we start getting their input and opinions,
Well, that's what
The
Valle was talking about last year, was
legendary
that we need
players
to
like
get
Otis
more.
Taylor might be lost.
Absolutely.
Well, I think
I don't feel like the window's not very much open anymore. We have a small window to get him in right now.
Well, I think that another thing when players, you think about that incident in 1971 when Otis Taylor had that big fight with Ben Davison, when Ben Davison speared Len Dawson, and it kind of cost Kansas City a chance to get in the playoffs. Raiders came back and won that football game. I think that kind of put a black mark on Mr. Taylor's career in somewhat sense. You never know how people hold certain things against you. But
true.
At the end of the day, all I know is this. As far as I'm living, I'm gonna say about Mr. Taylor, the skill set, high flyer, prototype, graceful, dynamic, tall,
Fast.
speed, 6'2", about 220,
6'3",
toughness,
220, yeah.
the ability to track the ball, concentration, body control, and the speed. And like I said, when you look at that really dreary day in 1970, that 46-yard out that he took to the house. And then to me in 1966, when he averaged 22 yards of reception in the AFL, hey man, you can't say no more about Otis Taylor to me. He played on the Super Bowl team. And how I really grade this, and I'm going to leave it at this, I always go back and look what some of the players say on your team as a teammate. Len Dawson is well respected. Bless his soul, he went to glory this past year. He said Otis Taylor by far was the best teammate he played with. He said Otis Taylor would give his jersey for the Kansas City Chiefs. Nothing says it more when your star quarterback, who's in the Hall of Fame, hey, it's enough said there. But whatever reason why he's not, go ahead, sir.
No, it's just saying, I'm agreeing with you. Drop the mic.
Yeah, drop the whatever we saying here about Otis Taylor, we know, but it's got to take other people. But really, at this point in time, in my mind, I would stand and argue with anybody that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I mean, I wouldn't even waste my time, because if you look at the game, it was a running game back then. Then everyone want to talk about Fred Biletnikoff. They want to talk about Don Maynard. They want to talk about Lance Allworth. But
it took Biletnikoff 60 more games to catch and pass him.
But you said it, Mr. Watkins, when you said Ken Houston validated for Otis Taylor. Len Dawson validated for Otis Taylor. We don't need to say no more. We don't need to hear about it from nobody else.
Bobby Bell was doing it after he passed away. All I saw on Kansas City television, it was a lot of Bobby Bell and a lot of Willie Lanier, and both of them were like, it's ridiculous.
And when you look at it, to me,
they're Hall of Famers.
when you get to the professional level, was the NBA, Major League Baseball, or the NFL, the ultimate goal is a champion. That's never gonna go. And when you look at Otis Taylor, one thing I'm gonna take away from that 1969 team, 70 Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl IV, 13 players from the SWAC. 13 players from the SWAC. Otis Taylor's 46-yard touchdown. And then the starters that played in that game, Jim Kearney, Prairie View, Jimmy Marcellus, a rookie from Tennessee State, Willie Lanier from Morgan State, Buck Buchanan from Grambling. That's what I'm going to take it away. Willie Mitchell, Tennessee State, Emmett Thomas, Bishop.
Curly Culp, where did he go to school?
Who was that?
Curly Culp, where did he go to school?
He went to Arizona State, I believe.
Oh, did he? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
So
he was a stud too.
At the end of the day, it's nothing I don't have to say no more. My vote is for Otis Taylor. Unfortunately, he's not in the Hall of Fame. He might end up like Mr. Ken Riley, who passed away and got inducted to play at Florida A&M with the Bengals. But
and Cliff Branch.
Yes, yes, sir.
People need to get their flowers while they're alive. and
Yes, sir.
when the can enjoy it. And that's another.
But
point of
we're at a time where the numbers in the National Football League, from an offense standpoint, is at another level. It's a passing game. It's more, to me, more entertainment by scoring touchdowns. That's what sells tickets. The glamour guys throwing the ball. But when you look at the end of the day, I'm just a guy that was born in the 60s. I was blessed to see a lot of football in the 60s. And then throughout the 70s, the game kind of progressed to a more speed game. And when I went to school in 70, I went to school from 78 to 82, then it started to really change, even though the wishbone was invented then. But even on the pro side, you kind of start seeing the change. And with Joe Montana and Dan Marino throwing the football a lot, especially Dan Marino. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, is that the game is explosive right now, the National Football League. But I only feel like the players that came before and played this great game should get a lot more love. And all I can say is Otis Taylor is on the top of my list as one of the greatest receivers that ever played the game. He set the tone for everybody else that's in the Hall of Fame. And skill set I just stated at another level. Super Bowl champion, that alone to me should get you in the Hall of Fame. Because there's a lot of people that played in this game. Hugh Green that's played in this game and ain't even sniffed the ring. But hey,
Ken Houston didn't. I mean,
Okay.
he played on some bad football teams, man. Some bad football teams.
And back then, when you look at it, it was very, very hard to get to that game. That's why you got to give kudos to the Steelers of the 70s.
Oh, man.
Man, even though I'm not a Steelers fan,
Right.
but what they done winning 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, man, that's magic.
Only because they were playing the Cowboys.
Yeah. Yep. That's magic. That's magic. That's magic. Yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. And here's the one thing, and I'll continue to say this, and we're going to continue working for this thing. And I'm so glad to have you on board with us too, Vincent. And like I said, you kind of introduced me to the man. Other than, I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know how great he was. And I kept wondering how many people were going to remember him or care. People care, and that's the whole thing. Is that he made an impression on folks all over the country. You know, there was a guy that had left a comment yesterday on one of the videos that said he was a Boston kid, and the first time he saw him was at Fenway Park, and he stopped liking the Patriots and loved Otis Taylor and the Chiefs because of how amazing he was. And you know, when I finally started finding some film, I'm like, good grief. I call up my boys. Hey, you got to look at this guy. Tell me what you think, because I don't want to just be, you know, thinking of it on, you know, maybe I'm missing something here. What am I missing? They're all like, whoa. You know, because I wasn't born until he was done playing. So it was, and I grew up watching Jerry Rice. So to me, this was a hard place for me to get to. But I can tell you that he's definitely top 5 all time to me. There's no way that if you stick him in any of those offenses, even a guy like Michael Irvin would tell you, I think that he was bigger and more physical than Michael Irvin was. You know?
Yeah, and this is Turner, you know, you turned us on to, or at least confirmed in my mind, how great he was, because, you know, I was out there, you know, thinking I was some kind of lone wolf, thinking that what my eyes were trying to deceive me wasn't true. But you made it known in some of your editorials that
there's a lot of people in
I
Houston,
was on
and a
the
lot
right
of
track.
people in Kansas City that love him, and when they're still calling him their favorite Chief of all time, 50 years after he last played. Look, man,
says a lot.
Enough said. The dude is a Hall of Famer in so many ways. I mean, just what they did at the merger era. I mean, they changed the game. They changed it. I mean, when in doubt, put them in, is the way I feel about this time. And I know a lot of these players wouldn't want it that way, and I don't think that Otis would. But I have not heard a single football player that knew anything about Otis Taylor that it would tell you that he didn't belong. None of them. So
my final words, I always say, like, when I think about Otis Taylor, man, I think about, you know, being a 9-year-old, like the great Sly Stone. Hot fun in the summertime. That's what I think about Otis Taylor, baby. Sliding the Family Stone. Hot fun. Hey, man.
I love
you
it.
don't
Man.
have to have no validation. Just read the comments what his quarterback said, Lynn Dawson. That's enough for me. And all I can say is he got one of the most explosive plays, that 46-yard out in the Super Bowl, where he has stepped it down the sideline. That's never going to leave my memory of great moments, sport moments in my life. There's certain moments that get me up. Ali beating Foreman and Zaire, but more than Cassius Clay beating Sonny Liston in 64 in Miami. The O.J. Simpson run in 67 before he got to the Bills. John Carlos and Tommy Smith, the Olympics, baby. Bob Gibson striking out.
Can I say one thing, Vincent? Because this kind of applies to what you're talking about. And I continue to hear these things. When the first time we asked Ken Houston, who do you compare him to? And I'm thinking players of the modern era, things like that. He was like Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, Ralph Cooper, who grew up. He's a Hall of Fame radio guy from Houston. I mean, he's been around. I mean, he's a little younger than Otis was, but he grew up and was in the same school as Otis Taylor. And he says Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron James. This guy, he transcends the game. It's not about football. It's about athletes, period. And you saying that is another validation for me because, again, you don't hear them talking about Jerry Rice or Randy Moss or T.O. None of them. That's not who these guys are talking about. They put him on the level of the all-time great athletes to ever do it. That's all I'm going to say. If you are that guy, then we shouldn't have this conversation. We shouldn't even have to have this conversation. It's silly. I'm going to leave it at that one. But thank you so much for saying what you did because it just reminds me every time we talk to somebody, this is what we get. We do not get comparisons to other receivers. We get comparisons to great athletes of all time. That's it. It's crazy stuff. Folks, make our voice heard for me, please. Please, please, please. Make sure that you get over to
also
100 yards of football. They have it. Listen, for you guys that Hank and Hawaiian Ice, you guys, these are two of my guys that are always on my streams. These dudes have an awesome, awesome channel. Vincent's got some great work. He's one of his guys that does a lot of content there. Former Florida State defensive All-American and Bobby Butler. They have some very, very cool content over there. Make sure that you go over there, check them out. It's 100 yards of football. You'll love it. I watch them every day. I love their show. It's just awesome stuff. Also, make sure that you get over to right now we're on the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast channel, but everything is going to be posted back to the Way Past Due channel because it is way past due time for him to be in the Hall of Fame. We're going to continue to put everything there. Make sure that you guys please help get the more times you hit the like button, the more times we get subscribers, the more times they send our video out. So help us out with that. You know, we'll crank this out. I know a lot more people will see this than would have seen it already, but I'm telling you, he deserves to be in the. I mean, if you've watched any of the videos, and we're gonna end the show with the video of his exploits. So, you know, check that out. But make sure you guys get over there, subscribe to the 100 Yards of Football, hit the like button there too. If you do that, it's great.
The next time, Vincent.
Yes, sir. A pleasure meeting you, Mr. Terry. Thank you. And
Same here.
It's an
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me on tonight, Mr. Watkins.
Absolutely, man. Can't wait to do it again. And anytime you'd like to come on, you just let me know. We will we'll have you there. Folks, thanks a lot for coming and checking out the show. We're gonna let you see this amazing video here of his exploits as we close out, but we will see you on the next one.
Bless
He's the
you.
best I've played against.
Right.
He's the best I've played against, and most of it happened in college. I mean, he was impossible. And when you look back at his film, you can take the film of Otis Taylor and match it up against anybody right now in modern day football.